What's going on, guys? Welcome back to the channel. For today's video, we're going to be checking out some of the older, pretty awesome Transformers, which honestly I would love to see remade for the Studio Series line. Now this here is part 2. I do plan to release a part 3 to kind of conclude this trilogy, so you guys be sure to let me know down below what characters would you guys love to see remade and what figures should make it onto the next list. Now first up, we are throwing it all the way back to the original 2007 live action movie with Decepticon Frenzy, who is surprisingly the only on-screen character so far not to receive the Studio Series treatment, which honestly is kind of crazy considering I believe he had more screen time than even Megatron. So this is the original 2007 Fast Action Battlers Frenzy. I do believe the only transforming version that Hasbro ever officially produced for the character, and let's just say this figure definitely shows roughly 16 years worth of engineering, because from a design perspective he is looking crazy. Unfortunately pretty much inaccurate compared to how he did finally appear in the movie, which is a shame, but you know what, this actually isn't a bad figure to kind of mess around with. So as we very quickly check out the details, you know, that head sculpt is looking awesome, definitely accurate despite the rest of the proportions kind of being a little crazy. I also like the 6 cybernetic details you can see here for the torso, you know, even the quadruple arms are looking pretty sick, but as you check him out here from the back, he was loaded with kibble, which is such a shame, and these older Fast Action Battlers were pretty much large deluxe figures, especially in comparison to some of the more recent Studio Series releases. So the reason why I would love to see this guy remade is not only to kind of complete that original 2007 lineup, but so that we can have a Frenzy which is much better to scale with some of the other Studio Series Decepticons. They could maybe even have this guy transform into an actual boombox like this Fast Action Battler can, and I'm going to be honest with you guys, despite this being an older 2007 figure, the boombox that this guy has is incredible, so nicely detailed. So it would be kind of cool if Hasbro took the concept which we have here and pretty much just shrink it down to the core class, because I really think that is the perfect scale point for this guy. And of course, unfortunately, they would have to kind of get rid of the whole spring-loaded gimmick where this guy, much like in the movie, can kind of projectile a shuriken out of him, which is a pretty sweet gimmick, but as a result of that, you would then get a much more to scale version of this character, which honestly, I would absolutely love to see. Next up, we have a non-appearance character, which I'm so glad to include on the list due to the brand new concept art subline. This here is Revenge of the Fallen Ransack. Now, this guy originally was a scout class, which is pretty much, I'd say, a small deluxe class by today's standards, but what a killer design. And this guy was actually a pretty big part of kind of the Revenge of the Fallen comic book tie-in series. So he was pretty much a loyal servant of the Fallen, much like Jetfire. He was sent to Earth, kind of in pursuit of the Tomb of the Primes. You know, he was sent to track down the Matrix of Leadership, and he was super loyal to the Fallen. I'm also loving the details. I mean, check out the chest piece. The leg design is looking awesome. I love the way the wings kind of fold up on the back. You know, this really is a killer design, and this figure would transform into an amazing World War I biplane. Unfortunately, we never see those alt modes now when it does come to modern Transformers. So honestly, I would love to see this guy kind of remade for the Studio Series line, at the very least as a deluxe class. And you know what? If they were to bump him up to Voyager, that would be even better, because as I mentioned, what an amazing design. It's such a shame that this is an unused design, because had it at the very least kind of made a cameo in the movie, maybe to fight off against Jetfire for a split second, I think that would have been really cool, because he is looking awesome, especially for something which was released as part of the 2009 toy line. Now, next up, we are throwing it to my personal favourite live-action movie, Transformers Dark the Moon. This here is the Commander Class Hatchet, which is pretty much core class by today's standards, and this is a pretty sick-looking figure. I mean, as we check out the details, that head sculpt for something which was originally released in the old 2011 lineup, I think is looking awesome, but there are just so many reasons why we need an update of this guy. So, the first one would be that technically we have already seen Crankcase and Crowbar, so to kind of complete the original Dread trio, we need Hatchet. The second reason would be that unfortunately this guy, unlike his previous two brothers, transformed into a jet, which was completely inaccurate to the movie, because all 3 of the Dreads would convert into these really sinister SUVs. So I'm kind of thinking maybe this was more so based on concept art. And the third reason would be there is actually a CG render which does exist for a Studio Series Hatchet, although that was revealed way back in 2022. We're now in 2024, and unfortunately we have heard nothing in regards to a release for this guy. So we definitely need an update for him, and I believe he is the only on-screen Decepticon from the Transformers 3 movie, with the exception of some of those protoforms, so far not to receive the Studio Series treatment. Now, crashing in as the first entry for the deluxes, we have the original 2007 Protoform Optimus Prime. Now, this is an amazing figure. Even by today's standards, it holds up so well, stacked up alongside some of the more recent Studio Series figures. The articulation is incredible. He's packing a waist joint, ankle rocker, wrist swivel, all of the main points of articulation that you would expect from a modern figure. But the main reason why I would love to see an update of him would be purely scale. Unfortunately, this was only a deluxe class, so he is kind of out of scale in comparison to some of the other Transformers, especially as this is supposed to be Optimus Prime. At the very least, he should be a Voyager class, and because this was originally a deluxe class, unfortunately, as you spin him around here to the back, he does have a pretty hefty backpack. Sadly, he's kind of kibble-tastic in his design, so despite looking amazing from the front, the illusion is very quickly lost as you spin him around here to the back. But with that being said, even the entry mode looks so spot on to the actual concept art, so Hasbro could pretty much take this original design, just blow it up to a Voyager class, tweak some of the kibble on the back, and I think you would have a perfect looking Protoform Optimus Prime, and they could maybe even correct the wrongs of the past and give us a Protoform Starscream which doesn't crumble into dust. Now, for the next entry, we probably have one of the best figures that I've included on the entire list. This is the Transformers Revenge of the Fallen Deluxe Class Lockdown. I really debated on whether or not I should include him in this list because the original is just so damn well done. For something which originally was released in 2009, this guy looks incredible. I mean, check out the details. The head sculpt looked sick. I just loved the asymmetry of the robot mode, and then when he would transform into the vehicle mode, he would be fully symmetrical. It was crazy from an engineering perspective, and I think this Revenge of the Fallen Lockdown is one of the very rare circumstances where the sequel absolutely obliterates the original. I love the Transformers animated Lockdown design, but there is no denying that when it came around to Transformers 2, they made him look so much more badass, and this would be kind of a perfect candidate for the concept art series. I really think Hasbro have the potential to do something really special with this guy, and I also believe that he did technically appear in the Transformers Cyber Mission Minisode series, so there is ground for him to kind of make it into the Studio Series because he is actually a part of some proper media. So yeah, I would love to see Lockdown. I mean, what a wasted design. He really should have made it into the movie, or at the very least had been the main design that we did see in Transformers 4, because I'm going to go ahead and say it, I think this design for Lockdown was so much nicer than what we finally did see in that Age of Extinction movie. And kind of sticking with the whole concept art idea, next up we have the Hunt for the Decepticons Deluxe Class Terror Dive. Now personally, I'm not too familiar with this character, although I am definitely able to appreciate a banging design, and what an incredible looking figure this is. So much like Lockdown, sadly he never actually appeared in either of the live action movies, whether that be Transformers 2 or Transformers 3. As we check out the details, that head sculpt is looking brilliant. I really like how they completely engineered the torso, definitely very different in comparison to the standard Seeker transformation, which I thought was really sweet. And he's also packing a trident. Unfortunately, we don't tend to see too many tridents included with Transformers, so that by itself I thought was badass. And he also transformed into this amazing, very streamlined, sleek jet. So another character which, again, I think would be perfect to kind of see a Studio Series remake of. They could maybe bump this up to a Voyager class and make it even better than the original version, because this is pretty solid, but articulation-wise, sadly, it is kind of lacking. There's no waist joint, there's no ankle pivot, so you are unable to kind of pull him off in most poses. So yeah, I would really like to see a remake of him, and unfortunately when it comes to the aftermarket, this guy is kind of tricky to track down. But now we move to my favourite live action movie once again, Transformers Dark of the Moon, and here we have the original deluxe class Laserbeak. Now this thing, I think when it comes to robot mode, is pretty much flawless. This guy looks super accurate to the movie, and it's mainly to do with that Laserbeak in the film never really had a specific alt mode. He would kind of mass shift into whatever he would want to be, so back in the day, it really allowed the design team to knock it out of the park when it comes to kind of the beast mode, and damn did they, because this thing looks so well done. As an alt mode, they pretty much gave him a drone, which did look kind of reminiscent of the original G1 Laserbeak, so I thought that was kind of cool. But the main reason why I would love to see an update of him is because unfortunately the tiny accessory which came packaged with the Studio Series Soundwave was crap. Really doesn't give this character the justice which it deserves, so I think we should see him remade as a core class. Maybe as an alternate mode they could have him transform into Soundwave's blaster, because unfortunately that Studio Series Soundwave came with no firepower, and that was a pretty awesome weapon which he did use in the movie. He was literally executing Autobots with it, so it would be kind of cool to see this guy remade much smaller, and again to transform into a weapon which could actually aid Soundwave. And finally, to kind of round things off when it comes to the deluxes, here we have the Dark of the Moon Q. Now, there are so many reasons why I would love to see this character remade. The first one would be the rarity. You know, unfortunately, this guy was released as part of the very final wave of Dark of the Moon deluxes, and those were all pretty much cancelled by retailers. So, unfortunately, this guy is incredibly elusive to track down, and not to mention super expensive. I mean, I've seen this go anywhere between 150 to 200, in some cases even more, and that just sucks, especially as at the end of the day, this is only a deluxe class. So that is the biggest reason. The second reason would be that unfortunately the main figure itself is kind of a little dated. I mean, for example, the knees don't actually kick backwards, instead they kick forwards, which means posing is super limiting. And the third reason, I believe he's the only on-screen Autobot that we haven't as of yet seen a Studio Series update for. So we definitely need a brand new Q/Wheeljack to kind of complete the collection, and I'm hoping the details are kind of similar to this one, because check out that head sculpt. For kind of a first pass at this design, he looks incredible, very Albert Einstein inspired. I'm also loving the details here for the chest, and accessory wise, he came with some of the best that we had ever seen from that Transformers 3 toy line. You know, he was packing 3 individual weapons, and then a final 4th MechTech weapon, which was by far one of the best out of the bunch. So it would be really cool to kind of see this character revisited. I would like to see how they could update it, because as I mentioned, I really like the way this guy looks, and his Mercedes mode too was pretty solid. So it would be really awesome to see Q. I'm hoping that he does release next year. I have heard rumours that there are listings for him to be released in 2025, and I am so damn excited to see his return. And speaking of characters which are heavily rumoured to be released next year, next up we have the Age of Extinction / Transformers 5 Optimus Prime. Now I think out of all of the entries on the list, none are more deserving of an update than this guy. I mean, come on. Unfortunately, it was kind of doomed from the beginning for this design of Optimus Prime, because he would go from being a pretty chunky Western star to this super sleek mechanised knight. When Prime would transform, there would be next to no vehicle mode kibble, and of course when it comes around to an actual physical transformer, those pieces have to end up somewhere, and unfortunately for this Optimus Prime design, 9 times out of 10 it would be on the back. Now, this is the Voyager class Optimus Prime. There has been a few leader class releases and some pretty decent Takara ones, which pretty much allow you to remove the entire backpack, but I'm after an Optimus Prime which can stay in one piece and that looks awesome without parts forming. I'm pretty certain it's possible, because they did come pretty close here with this Voyager. You know, I'm kind of thinking, had they just bumped this design up to leader, maybe they could have reduced all of this kibble, they could have dispersed of it elsewhere, because the legs aren't too bad, but that backpack really is an eyesore. It's pretty much the entire top part of the truck, so I am really looking forward to seeing the engineering of that supposed upcoming leader class, because the details on this Prime from the front are pretty spot on to the movie. I mean, check out the sculpting. The head sculpt is looking awesome, the chest piece in particular is looking sick. I mean, look at all of the tubes kind of beneath the armoured panels. He is looking great, and because he is rumoured to be a leader class, I'm hoping that not only is the engineering on point, but so are the accessories. It would be wicked to see him include both the sword and the shield and the shotgun, which he did use in both Transformers 4 and 5. And do you know what? Hasbro can totally get their money back from this mold, because not only could they release it as a Transformers 4 Optimus Prime, but then they could later repaint it down the line into a Transformers 5 Nemesis Prime. So I am willing to bet that if we do see this design in the future, it will more than likely be a leader class, and I am pretty certain that it will deliver and will hopefully be better than any of its predecessors. And so, for the final entry on this list, I'm kind of throwing in a hot take, but here we have G1 Megatron. I would love to see this design reapproached for the Studio Series, probably more so than any of the actual 86 characters that we've so far seen released, because we've had a lot of Optimus Primes, but not so many proper G1 Megatrons, and unfortunately, it really has to do with his alt mode. You know, back in G1, Megatron would transform into a firearm, so it does seem like for the longest time they've been kind of avoiding it. I mean, the Transformers Siege Megatron wasn't bad, but compared to some of the more recent Studio Series figures, unfortunately you can definitely see that it is stylized. So here we have the old Combiner Wars Megatron, which I really think was the last great G1 Megatron figure that we ever saw released, because robot mode wise he looks incredible. You know, he's packing the iconic bucket head design, a really sweet chest design, he's got a very decently sized fusion cannon, but unfortunately he doesn't transform into that original mode. Instead, he now converts into a tank, which I don't so much mind, and if that is the alt mode they have to give to a Studio Series Series 86 Megatron, then honestly, I'm just gonna have to take it on the chin. Because as long as there is a decent robot mode to kind of stack up against the upcoming Commander class Optimus Prime, I'm gonna be pretty happy. And you know what? They could totally pull a concept art Megatron on us, give us a tank mode which could be fan moded into his original G1 blaster. So yeah, really am looking forward to a potential Studio Series 86 Megatron, and that pretty much wraps up my list for part 2. So I would love to get your guys' thoughts down below. Out of all of the entries on the list, which are the ones you guys agree with the most, which are the ones you disagree with the most, and what characters would you guys like to see make it onto the third and potentially final list. I want to thank you guys all so much for watching, and until my next video, transform and roll out!